Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Secrets of High Performance AEC Firms. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software. My name is Misty Scott, and I'm pleased to be your moderator today. We'll begin with a quick intro video on how to get the most out of this webinar and interact with us today. Okay, here we go.
Hi, and welcome to this Applied Software webinar. We're glad you could join us today. Get more out of the webinar by clicking on the icons at the bottom of your screen. You can resize these. This button leads to resources. This button adjusts the volume. Just don't push this one. I'm watching you. Be sure to find Applied Software on social media and on our website, asti.com, where we'll empower you to discover what's possible. You can also find a complete schedule of upcoming events, on-demand webinars, and training on our calendar at asti.com/calendar. This is being recorded for your convenience. You'll be receiving an email with the recording link for future reference. And make sure to stick around. We'll answer questions at the end. See you there.
All right, fantastic. And guys, as the video mentioned, you can find a schedule of upcoming events, webinars, and training on our calendar at asti.com/calendar. So make sure you check that out. And I am super pleased to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. We have Petra Davison. She is the VP of Go-to-Market at Panzera, and Brad Peterson. He is the VP of Marketing at Workspot. Thank you both for joining us today. I know we've got some amazing content. And I just want to remind the attendees today, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and plug them into the chat box. We'll be answering them along the way. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn this over to you, Brad and Petra.
Oh, well, thank you, Misty. Yes, Petra and I couldn't be happier to be here today. What a great topic. We love this topic, secrets of high-performing AEC firms. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to tell you about Panzera and Workspot and all sorts of customer case studies, some examples of customers that have used both of our technologies to advance their firm along. It's just an amazing time now with the cloud and the opportunities we have there to really change our world and to go through this beautiful transformation. So, Petra, where are you coming in from today, by the way?
I'm coming in from New Zealand, which is why I sound weird why it's dark, because it's 5 a.m. But it's all good. I'm awake. I'm here. It's all good.
Cool. Well, here I am from sunny California at this time, and the sun is up here. We haven't handed it off to you yet in New Zealand. We'll take care of it and get it to you soon. So yeah, we got a beautiful day for you today, and you can see from this agenda here all the different topics that we're going to cover. Now, we got about an hour with you today, right? So like I said, we're going to talk about the technologies and the solutions, a video presentation of the demonstration that you're going to see, a live demonstration. And as Misty said, we absolutely encourage questions. So this is meant to be for you guys, and it's meant to be interactive. So fire your questions in the little Q&A box, and then we'll hand them along the way. All right? Okay, so you can see the agenda of what we're going to cover today. It's going to be some amazing stuff. But as we ask you to give us questions, we're also going to give you questions, okay? And so the polling questions. So the first one is here. Where is your primary work location today? Where are you coming in from? Now, some of you may prefer working from home, and that's working for you. Some prefer the office. And maybe you like a mix, a couple days at home, a couple days in the office, or maybe you're just entirely remote. And so if you're remote, you know, you're just always working from home. So why don't you guys go ahead and plug in your answers there, and then we can see how you guys are, you know, faring out there in the world. Yeah, exactly. So you just pick the one that makes the most sense. So Petra, for you, I think you're number 4 on the list, right? You're kind of remote?
I am always remote. Yep. Work from home for years now.
All right, good. Well, we know over the last couple of years, a lot of people just went home to work from home and so forth. And now that could be changing. So you could still prefer to do that, or maybe you prefer the office for reasons of proximity to folks you're working with. But maybe a mix is good for you. So let's go ahead and take a look at those results. So what we have here is, you know, a number of folks prefer to work from the office. Look at that. Nobody prefers to work from home. And then others just prefer a mix. So we got a 50-50 split across those two, which makes tons of sense. It's like office collaboration, and yet home, sometimes you're more productive there. What do you think of these results?
Yeah, look, that's exactly what we're seeing as well. I agree with you that often you're more productive at home. What I do find, though, is that particularly when you're starting out in your career, there's a lot to be said for being around other people. You can watch what they do, just to learn by osmosis. That is difficult to get when you're remote. So I think, hybrid is actually the ideal option. It's whatever works for you at the time.
Well, especially in the AEC space, because as you hire new engineers and designers and so forth, you need that mentorship to go on. And sometimes you need one of the young folk to look over the shoulder of the seasoned veteran and just experience it that way and have conversations in the hall. And yet go home and crush some work for a couple of days and come back and get a mix of it. I think that's very true. Results look that way. Hey, one more question for you. What were your biggest concerns and still your biggest concerns with remote workers? Is it the cost of that, supporting them in the office and at home, kind of dual cost if you're doing it in certain ways where it would be dual cost? Is it security? Is it productivity? Is it support, additional support, or what else might it be? So what is most impactful in your mind and in your business when you're supporting these folks that are, at home? Right? So that's what we want to figure out here, because, it's transitioned and changed over the last couple of years. Folks had to go home. Now, when people weren't ready for that, they added more VPN concentrators and had folks VPN in, but then they're hauling massive files at home, and that's painful. So with cloud services completely in the cloud, which you'll hear about today, it's not the case. And so it's actually more secure, better performance, less, it's like all sorts of pluses, and that's what we're all about. So let's take a look at your votes here. So we're seeing productivity. Yes. Major concern with folks going home is productivity. And look at this. It's like security and cost typically follow in, but now it's support and then something even other. Now, if you've got something other out there and want to drop it in the Q&A to let us know, feel free to do that. What do you think of these results, Petra?
It's interesting that security hasn't even rated. So, you and I have seen a shift back and forth, haven't we? As people first went home, productivity was a big deal in 2020. Security then flipped to become the most important. And it's really interesting that amongst this audience, productivity is back in the lead.
Yes, exactly. And, to grow your firm, to be competitive out there, productivity is key. And yet you don't have a business unless it's secure. So to pull off both of those is exactly where we're going today. Okay?
Yep.
So you want to start popping through a couple of these ideas here today, and then we'll jump into some details.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to set the scene for what does high performance look like? We're here to talk about what's behind high performance firms, but what do high performance firms look like? So obviously the end product is outstanding. These are the firms that are growing fast. They are able to be consistently productive. So what they're able to do is to produce great outcomes in the least possible time, which then, of course, means you can take on more projects. That, in turn, means that you can bid on more projects and you can get more ambitious with what you can take on because your throughput is so good quality-wise, and it's also so good time-wise. Then, of course, you start to grow. And all sorts of things obviously happen when your revenue goes up, but also your profit goes up. So you start to get a better name. Your own customers start to feel really good about you. And that, of course, because this is a whole of company experience here, that, of course, translates into happy people. So right throughout your firm, people know that the firm is doing well. They get bonuses. Nothing changes when it looks like there's a downturn or there's some frustrations in the industry. And you end up with a great place to work. And one of the things that we notice is that when you have a high-performance environment, you're able to attract high performers. And the more high performers you get on board, the happier everybody is, and everybody's game lifts up to that level. So there are lots and lots of good reasons to get yourself to this place where, regardless of your size, this is not about firm size, this is about how well your firm does within your industry.
And to pull
so
that
what
off,
we're aiming for is everybody looking great.
Yeah. And to pull that off, that last question was key. It's like, how do you support folks if they're, hybrid at work or at home? And what are your biggest concerns? Now, what is interesting is Dan came back and said his other concern, because there's that other box, was trust in the employee. And that's always been the challenge. It's like, I'm going to send these folks home, so are they going to work? Now, in the AEC space, sometimes it's interesting because you can monitor that activity because you bill for hours and so forth. So you might see that. And in other industries, it's not as clear. And then Ed also made a comment about communication and coordination. So the challenge is, like, if you're in the office, are you communicating and coordinating better than if you're distributed? It depends on how you're using tools and services and various things, and just the nature of people and the job description. It would be different across those as well, I think. And so high performance outcomes, like we have on the slide now, it seems like it comes back to, okay, I got a company. I need to win some projects so that I got some work to do. I need some talented people, and that's a challenge because trying to hire them, it's like they're in great demand. And then I need this platform that allows the workers to come together with the apps and the data and be massively productive, right? And architecturally, we help with that because Panzera Workspot come together to fix all those plumbing nightmares you had in the network, in the apps, app delivery, computers, and all that sort of stuff. And then you can really focus on the DNA of your business on top of that and really go to the next level. And I think that is what we're going to see today. So Dan and Ed, thanks for your comments there. Appreciate that. Keep those questions coming. All right, more characteristics.
Okay, so so what's behind the scenes? This one's a little bit more IT focused than the other characteristics. So first thing is technology that is super fast. You should feel like you're still in the office. Doesn't matter that you and I are a whole world apart. We should be able to work together like we're sitting right next to each other. We should be able to be consistently productive. So that doesn't mean that we have a good day one day and then the next day the technology is super slow and super frustrating. One thing that you and I just talked about is being able to employ good people regardless of where they are. We know this is such a big deal in the AEC industry right now. Finding skill, it's sounding like it's getting snapped up before you even have a chance to put the offer in. So, that means that you've got to expand your net as wide as possible. And that means your technology's got to be able to support that. So you can't go and hire a high performer, a superstar, and then give them technology that's going to frustrate the heck out of them. Another characteristic, obviously, is you are resilient. And so technology-wise, that means things like your data, your files are always available, your computing's always available. And whatever the world throws at you, you can just carry on, whether that's a cyber attack or whether it's a physical, geographically based disaster, you can just keep on trucking. When it comes to IT, you've stripped out all of the unnecessary work in IT. So, IT teams tend to take on a lot that's just keeping the wheels turning. And so the more that we can take out of that IT stack of work, the better operations run. That then also means that you can scale really quickly, you can scale easily. And the end result of this for IT teams is they can get on and innovate. I always say IT is often, some of the smartest people in the company are often in IT, right? And if you bury them under operational work, they have, they could do a lot for you, but they just can't get to it. If you can put them in a place where they can get to that innovative work, then you're flying.
Oh, yeah. So IT folks, critical thinkers, problem solvers. Now, when you take all of that smart and you're just doing break fix in the back room, and then you're up nights and weekends, diddling with little things, you could be, there's so much more potential there. If you apply all of this as a service, then all of that gray matter gets applied toward the business and innovation. And that's what you're talking about. And that's what we're seeing from our customers, and we're going to share with you guys. And by the way, this is because we can do this now. We couldn't do this 5 years ago. There are cloud platforms we can leverage to pull this off. Now, here's the question for you guys. Are you using the cloud today? Are you in Azure? Are you in GCP, AWS, or another cloud? Or are you not there yet, right? Now, so figure this out. Now, some companies have cloud-first strategies. And in that cloud-first strategy, they actually have to, when they need a service or a capability in their company, they have to go see if it's available in the cloud first, and they have to evaluate it, on its performance, availability, security, and all that sort of thing. That's a cloud-first strategy. Others may departmentally be pulling things in for CRM. CRM came in as a cloud service a long time ago, but other things may not have, voice services, email services, and so forth. So, and then all of a sudden just server workloads are pushed off and then put into the cloud. So that's the notion of this question today. Are you in the cloud today? You're kind of in Azure if you have Office 365, and this is multiple choice. You can pick all the ones that are associated with you, okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at those results. So not yet is, 50% here, is that right? Holy moly. okay, that's oftentimes the case. Is that, you know, you're just still looking at them, evaluating them, deciding. Now, 28.6% are in Azure. There's some folks in AWS and even other clouds. You know, if you're considering, you know, ERP and CRM and various things as other clouds, yes, you might be in Oracle or IBM or something like that, of course. But look at that, Petra. Half of them are not in the cloud yet. What a perfect webinar for these folks, right?
That was exactly what I was thinking. Yep. We should get on and tell people how to make this work.
All righty, let's do it.
Okay, so first up, we've talked about some of the characteristics of high-performance firms. I want to give you guys an idea of a couple of Panzera examples, and then further on in the webinar, Brad has got a bunch more examples. These first couple are people's first foray into the cloud. So this is before Workspot even comes into the equation, and this is a pretty typical path, because Panzera lets you get your data under control, and that's the foundation. Then Workspot is that blazing fast performance to the last mile. So here is an architecture firm who must remain nameless. It's a name that you will all know in this industry. Okay, so they did a very purposeful proof of concept, and this is years back now. They took 200 of their power users of Revit. Now, you people here will know that Revit is one of the trickiest applications to use across any distance at all. It is so affected by latency that virtually everything that you put in its way will slow it down. So they decided to take the before and after. So what were users going through with Revit before Panzera, and what were they going through after it? So they found that for every single one of these power users, they saved 30 minutes a day on 2 operations alone. And that is how long it took Revit files to open, and how long it took them to save, and also how long it took them to sync. So this is about sitting and waiting for the spinning wheel of death to stop spinning so that you can actually get on and do your work as you're opening files and as you're saving your changes. And of course, if you don't save your changes on a regular basis, you know what's going to happen. Something's going to trip up. You're going to lose your work. So there's a huge amount of frustration that was going on with these users. And so to remove 30 minutes a day on a consistent basis is, firstly, it's a phenomenal saving for the company from a cost perspective, but also as a productivity boost, it's 120 odd hours extra a year of productive work for every single user. And then, of course, it's not just that, it's how good the users feel about working in that environment. So, you know, a high performer does not want to be sitting there frustrated, waiting for something to happen so that they can get on and do their work. They just want the technology to support them. So overall, amazing outcome just on those metrics. And that's before they consider all of the other benefits like extra data, resiliency, and durability, and you know, the stuff that comes out of the IT stack. So, you know, as a statement for ROI, this is really quite extraordinary. Now, this is a big firm. Doesn't matter necessarily the size of the firm. It's more about the workload. So for anybody listening here, you know, you'll know the hourly rate that your users get paid. You'll know the type of work that they're doing. So you can just do that calculation for yourself and see where you get. So on the one hand, it's a cost saving. On the other hand, you can see how you can start to take on more projects and get them finished in less time. Another one, and this one I can name, and again, it's a name that you will recognize within this industry. And this is all about ease of management. So Floor, of course, works across the entire United States and internationally. And they've got people spread everywhere, like all of us. You know, some are at home, some are in the office, some work between. And they collaborate on enormous projects. And of course, like all of us, they're producing data at a rapid rate. So they initially looked into Panzera to try and get data under control. Because you know, the duplication in the data that they have was causing storage volumes to just blow out, and managing that data and keeping it safe is a huge deal. So this example is more of an IT-based example. to show what it is that was pushing them to the cloud, and them to a collaborative kind of workflow that they could do regardless of where their users were, without the complexity that they were experiencing. And we'll talk a little bit more about how Panzera actually deals with this. So with that, let's jump into secret number one of high-performing firms. So secret number one is about data.
And by the way, let's find out, do a little sample here again. By the way, we encourage questions. Keep those questions coming, but we're going to ask you one, and that is, are you using Panzera today? Okay. So are you using it as a physical appliance? And you might have it across, a number of different offices and so forth, or are you using it as a virtual appliance in the cloud, or both? This is a multi-choice, or not yet, right? So you can pick any one of these that apply. A lot of folks put the data on Panzera in a physical office if they'll have a lot of folks with workstations in there, because as Petra was saying, it's like you need proximity. If you have proximity to the right version of the right file, then you're productive. If it's far away and you got to wait half an hour for the file to transfer and it's the wrong version when you get, it's like, well, that doesn't help. And when your workstations are in the cloud and your Panzera appliance is in the cloud, you have proximity again. And that cloud is only 20 milliseconds away from you. Get out of here. It's like you can't get a better configuration than that. So let's look at what we got here. Look at this. We've got 16.7% that are ES and they're physical. Nobody in the cloud yet. I'm telling you, this is the perfect webinar for these folks. And then there's a bunch of folks that are just looking at it right now to figure it out. Cool. Excellent. All right. Kick it off.
Perfect. All right. So introducing Panzera. Panzera gives you complete cloud data management. Right? So you might know us for helping you with collaboration. You might know us for a bunch of things. But really what we're doing is we're helping you to manage your data, to put it where it needs to be, to keep it safe. And we've got a few different layers to the Panzera platform. So I'll run through this quickly, and then we're mostly going to be focusing on the bottom layer, which is the data layer, and that's the global file system for this webinar. So 3 layers. CloudFS is the global file system. That's where the data sits. Across the top, we've got Panzera Data Services, and that gives you your visibility and your analytics and your governance, lets you see what your users are doing, for example. And then across the top of this, we've got some smart apps, and these are the optional extras that you might want to add to your stack that gives you give you things like additional access, extra protection. So that's what the stack looks like. Let's just dig into this a tiny bit more. So again, everything starts with data. You've got to get your data under control before you can get yourself to a point where you're really performing well. All right, so CloudFS gives you this distributed data consolidation. So for those who don't have a solution like Panzera right now, this might sound a bit familiar. So you'll have a bunch of offices and you will have data stored at or near all of those offices. The reason you do that, as Brad mentioned before, is you've got to have your users close to the data. The more distance you put between the users and the data, the slower everything becomes. It takes files a while to open. Everything takes a while to save. All right, these are the extra minutes that just keep compiling in the day that let you not be productive. CloudFS lets you collaborate across sites. So you could have sites on either coast of the States, you could have sites across the world. You should be able to collaborate as if people are sitting right next to each other. Data protection is a huge one. We make you ransomware proof. All right, nobody can be productive whatsoever if you get hit and taken down by a cyber attack. So we keep your data safe, and I'll talk a bit more about how we do that. We even keep your data massively available. I don't know how many people remember back this last December, AWS Cloud Storage went down 3 times in December. 3 times, that's very disruptive. That's unusually frequent. But of course, when something like that happens, there's so much built-in resiliency for these huge cloud providers that when it does go down, it's catastrophic. A lot of things have gone wrong. So it doesn't just come back up a couple of minutes later. It's down for a sustained period of time. Also not great for productivity. Right? The other thing CloudFS does is it behaves like a hybrid cloud NAS. So hybrid cloud just means that it's a mixture of on-premise and in the cloud. So that's what Panzera gives you. It gives you this local feel with all of the benefits of the cloud, being things like scalable storage and security. Very, very secure solution. It is secure enough that if you are taking on government projects, for example, or very secretive, sensitive projects, Panzera solution is secure enough to support those. And the last thing, of course, is global file distribution. So everybody gets to see the same view of files no matter where they are. Let's run through the next couple of layers very quickly. So data services. This is a SaaS platform, and it gives you visibility of everything that's going on in CloudFS. So if your users are opening files, copying files, deleting files, moving files, that's the sort of thing that data services will let you see. It'll let you find files regardless of where they're stored. You could even, if you've got some physical storage appliances still, you can hook those up to data services. You know, IT teams spend a lot of time every year just searching for files that a user has lost. So again, this is about stripping out time from the IT stack and keeping an eye on exactly what's going on with your data at any given time. And then the final layer, we'll just run through this super quickly. We've got smart apps, things that will allow you, for example, like Company Connect does, to collaborate between companies without having to copy files out to a third-party service. So, for example, if you're subcontracting some work to another firm, you could make available a part of your file system, and they can securely access that without having to look for something like a BIM 360 if you needed to share some Revit files. Additional security and compliance. Panzera Protect is something we'll be talking about in the very near future. It's early ransomware detection. So we've got your data protected. What if we could tell you that there's a ransomware attack going on the moment it starts and get it stopped for you? All right, so these apps are all about more view of your data, smarter things that you can do with your data. So now we're going to dig into that data layer itself. This is the cloud file system. And, you know, Brad, a lot of the reason that people look to the cloud in the first place is about storage, all right? And it's a familiar problem. Storage volumes are blowing out of control. And storage, legacy storage hasn't changed in more than 20 years. It's probably getting on for 30 years now. The reason it hasn't changed in more than 30 years is it's not in the best interests of those suppliers to change it, right? So good business for them looks like just selling another storage device when it comes to the end of its 5-year life or 7-year life. Right. And it also looks like just selling more storage as your storage volumes keep growing. And of course, you've got to keep data for a certain length of time, which means you've got to store it somewhere. And it's just this cyclical problem that you cannot get out from underneath you. So you look at this as a storage problem, but really it's not a storage problem at all. What's happening is that you're not able to manage your data in the first place. And if you have more than one location, everything that you do in a legacy storage environment makes this problem worse. Because you have to have storage volumes at each of those locations. And so you're replicating data endlessly. So you might have, let's say you've got 100 terabytes, for example, up to 70% of that could be duplication. They're literally identical or very similar copies of files. You've got to store them because they've got to be available to your people. So what Panzera does is it gives you a single authoritative data source. Now, this makes your life so much easier. Cannot tell you. So right now, let's say you might be managing 5 locations. That's 5 different data sets that you've got to keep an eye on. You've got to back up. You've got to do some offsite replication to keep that data safe. Panzera changes all of that for you. All right. So we give you better access to that stored data, which virtually means you start to do impossible things with that data. So what does this even look like? You can choose any object store. Okay, now an object store is literally cloud storage. Okay, now you can choose a public cloud, so you could put your data in AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or any of the other cloud object stores that you prefer. Or you could even keep it on premises. So for example, you could be using an Isilon type device. You could use Cloudian. There's a number of excellent on-prem object stores, as long as it's something that's compatible with Panzera, and we're compatible with, I'm going to say 35 different object stores, different types of clouds, then you can take your data from wherever it's stored right now, and you can consolidate it into that object store, into the cloud. Now, something we do at the time that we're consolidating it, which is truly stunning, is we deduplicate it on the fly. So I mentioned you've got a whole lot of replication in all of those locations. As we're ingesting data into Panzera, we're looking at it. We're saying, have we seen that block of data before? Yes, we have. Therefore, we don't need to ingest that one. And so you end up with this minimized data set without losing any data, but we've given you a whole new way of managing your data. So it's consolidated, it's deduplicated, it is considerably less than what it was when you had multiple locations, because we've stripped out all of that duplication. Now, the next thing we do is we give all of your locations, as many as you have, and as you can have as many as you like, access. All right, so now access that data set and be working off it. And you just pay for the capacity. It's data under management. So now we've given you, we've not only reduced your storage bill, and we've gotten rid of a whole lot of infrastructure that you've been paying for to support all of that storage, but we've said to all of your users, here's your one data set. Now you can work together on all of these files. And this is the thing that's really cool about Panzera and unique about Panzera. So regardless of where your locations are, and regardless of how far apart they are, you get real-time data consistency in every one of those locations. What does that even mean? That means that if I'm working on a file and I save a change to that file, so I commit the change to the file system, and Brad then attempts to open that file, he will see the latest change that I just made as he opens that file. And it doesn't matter that we're more than that, it's more like 12,000 kilometers apart. It doesn't matter. As part of that file open operation, the data changes go directly to Brad, even if they have not yet made it to the cloud store. Okay, so dig in just quickly to the way Panzera works. You'll see that there are three components, all right? You've got your object store in the middle, that's your hub, the spokes, all of the locations, and you'll see one of those as a cloud region, and that'll hold that thought because that will become important in a couple of minutes. Then you've got that dotted line around the edge, and that means that while every one of those locations is syncing changes to the cloud every minute, so once every 60 seconds as your users are changing files, any changes get synced to the cloud store, so they're safe, but 60 seconds is still a while to wait if you need to see data immediately. So every location can reach out to another location in real time at the point that you open a file, and data changes will be there as the file opens. The other thing that is an absolute lifesaver and productivity booster is file locking. File locking is the sort of thing that nobody cares about until it doesn't work. It's something that you haven't had to think about when you are working within an office off a network drive, because the applications that give you file locking just make that work. So what file locking means is that Brad and I can't overwrite each other. So either if we're working on a file that has a file type that has complete file locking, then if I've got that file open for editing, Brad can't even open it. You get that little pop-up box that says this file's already open for editing. Do you want a read-only copy, or do you want to come back later? That's it. If you're working on something like Revit that allows byte range locking, and imagine how fast data has to move back and forth to allow this to happen, then we can be working within the same project, within the same model, but not on the same piece of it. So we can't accidentally overwrite each other. And to give you an idea of just how impactful this is, Brad and I did a webinar a few months back with one of our joint customers. He said to us that on one project alone, when he took on Panzera, and at that point he'd also taken on Workspot, he saved $1 million in time for not having to merge file versions together. $1 million on one project alone. There's a big boost to the bottom line, and also makes the world of difference to the IT team who was doing that work, trying to merge files together and being endlessly frustrated, not to mention what the users go through. All right, so you can start to see, as you build out this picture, just how impactful it is to be able to extend what has always been a productive way of working that works well when you're in a single office and gives you the ability to collaborate. You can now extend that across whatever distance you need it to be extended across. We have companies working within the United States. We have companies working like this across the globe. It doesn't matter how far apart those offices are. If you've got talent in one place, you can pull them into a project without any fuss, without any delay, and those people can work on the same file set without overriding each other. All right, it is truly one of the secrets of high-performing firms, and it, as a number of our customers have said to both Brad and I, it's a game changer. So that's a quick rundown of how the file system works. The next part, which of course becomes more and more important with every passing day, is you can't perform at all, never mind about high performance, if your data has been encrypted by ransomware. And ransomware, the stats just keep on growing. It's going nowhere fast, and it is a huge scourge. Panzera makes you immune to ransomware. All right, now what that means is, it's not that you don't get hit by a ransomware attack. You could get hit by a ransomware attack. What ransomware does is it encrypts your files, okay, to the point that you cannot open them without, hopefully, as far as the attackers are concerned, paying a ransom to them. And they will then give you a key that will allow you to decrypt them. Panzera handles data very differently. It doesn't allow that to happen. So to your users, they don't need to learn anything to use Panzera. It just looks like a file system. But behind the scenes, we're doing something completely different. So as files are being worked on, they are comprised of data objects, all right? And those objects sit in object block storage, which is cloud storage. Now, every time we make a change to a file, there is a new object generated. All right? We do not allow any of those objects in cloud storage ever to be overwritten. They're completely immutable. So that means that they can't be deleted unless you go through a secure delete process, which you cannot do by accident. They cannot be changed. They cannot be encrypted. They cannot be damaged in any way. So you can see in the second step of this little diagram here, as ransomware comes along and it encrypts your file, we see that as new data. And of course, we sync new and changed data up to the object store from every location. So we'll still do that. But you can see that these are brand new objects, and they haven't touched the data that comprises that original file. Some lines pointing to those objects. Those are metadata pointers. So what Panzera does is it says this file is comprised of these 4 objects, and we've snapshotted it. Then you have a ransomware attack, and it says, okay, this file is now comprised of 4 new objects, and we've snapshotted that. The snapshots themselves are also read-only. So all we need to do to undo the effects of a ransomware attack is revert you to a previous snapshot. And your clean blocks are back because we've just moved the metadata to point to new blocks. That's it. You've shrugged off the attack. And you can do that with one file. You can do that with entire directories. You can do that with the entire file system. So you can see this doesn't just matter for ransomware. Let's say somebody accidentally deletes a file or a file gets corrupted, something like that. Those data blocks, original data blocks, are always there. You can revert back to a point prior to the damage, and you're back up and running. Something that's changed the world for a bunch of customers, because we have had a lot of customers hit by ransomware. Okay, about to hand off to Brad here. I want to give you a view of how Panzera works with Workspot. So remember I said, hold that thought that Panzera can be in a cloud region. This is what Panzera looks like in a cloud region right next to Workspot. And Brad, I'm going to push it over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Petra. And that is the key. You know, the key ingredient here is to take the data and the applications in proximity to the user. When those 3 things are in tight proximity to each other, you got opportunity for amazing productivity. So with Panzera doing lock and sync across clouds, You have that user with their app in that cloud, cranking on that copy of that version of that data, and it's all managed, and productivity couldn't be any better. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about. At this point, we understand how the data gets managed. Now we're going to talk about how do I get that GPU accelerated workstation in the cloud right next to that data running my applications, okay? Now, you can do all that yourself manually, or Workspot can deliver it as a full-on turnkey service. So that's why we say, you know, we're the only SaaS platform, software as a service for cloud PCs. And we can do this for an individual company that's small, medium-sized, or even globally enterprise. We do this all day long for all sorts of folks. You wouldn't want to do it yourself. So let me ask you that question. How many of you have tried to do VDI on-prem in the past? You know, years ago, there weren't clouds, and you had to do it on-prem, and that was the only way to go. Now, to virtualize GPU-accelerated virtual machines was even more difficult. All right, it was tough to do that cost effectively, and it was complicated and so forth. And then were you seeing users coming in from far away that were seeing good experiences and all that? So that was the challenge right there, right? So that's this question now. Before we go into how Workspot actually provides this in the cloud as a turnkey service and have done it for so many customers running all these apps that you guys are already running today, you know, we're going to just get a little sample here for how many of you out there have actually attempted this yourself and what your experience has been. Because everything changes. The complexity is gone. The cost associated with trying to do that is certainly gone as well. And it comes to you as a service from a single vendor with ASTI helping you. And I'll show you in the architecture how that actually works, okay? So there you go. We've had a couple of folks with success, and then we have had most of the crew that actually hasn't done this at all. So that makes tons of sense. I want to start off with the Punchline here now, which is essentially, you know, a bit of a diagram that looks like this. And this shows, if you, as I said before, to get the applications and the data in proximity to the users for the best productivity. Instead of having a single data center folks connect into, or sending laptops home that they have to, you know, pull data down, and now there's versioning all over the place potentially. This is the notion of putting Workspot GPU accelerated cloud PCs, cloud workstations in the cloud in proximity to Panzera where the data is. And you might do that on the West Coast, you might do it on the East Coast, you might do it in another country, but it's all going to be driven as a service. Your engineers and designers in proximity to that cloud can be assigned to a service out of that cloud. And I'll show you a live demo on this thing in just a minute to show you what that looks like. So again, users, apps, data, proximity means performance, turnkey. You know, locations all over the world is set up now on top of either Azure and the various clouds out there to be in proximity to where your users are, which means you can now hire people from anywhere and you can win projects from anywhere as well. Now, what does it take to do that? Historically, look at all these little Lego pieces, right? All that stuff was required to build this on your own. And folks attempted this. I know. I was in that industry for 10 years, right? And essentially, you know, the VDI, the virtual desktop infrastructure part, you were buying servers and storage and networking and then software to broker all this stuff and so on. And the underlying infrastructure and the integration into other things like authentication and multi-factor, and then the levels of support. And imagine all the vendors in that and supporting each vendor's product and versioning control. Update this version, that version falls over. And then just, you know, just the real-time reporting and integration into billing and monitoring tools and so forth. I mean, there were companies that were created over the last 10 to 20 years to actually provide all these little Lego pieces. And then that's all we had. That was the only choice. You had to buy them all and build them all and make them all work. Well, that's not the case anymore. As we go to this slide, now you'll see that the orange pieces are actually automated services and built as real cloud native services in the cloud that are pretty infinitely scalable and dynamic. So when folks come to us and say, I want 10 workstations or 100 workstations or 1,000 workstations in any location around the world, you know, the software as a service turnkey capability that we have allows us to fire those up and then deliver those. And so you consume those on demand. You're not building all this out with a huge upfront CapEx expenditure and then having to learn and support all that. No, you consume it on demand as a service, and then it's running. And now you don't have to do break fix anymore. You can actually go shoulder to shoulder with your engineers and help them with the problems they have designing buildings or airports or bridges and finding new tools that make their lives better and your company better. You get out of the closet and you get out there and help folks because this whole capability is a turnkey service. And what does that look like globally? Workspot the Cloud actually comes in and orchestrates this whole deal, and then grabs the resources in the various elements of cloud services infrastructure around the world. You can see locations here in GCP and Azure. Grabs the resources inside there and aggregates it together and hands it to your engineer, your designer. What do we have to do? Well, we have to grab the GPU or a fractional GPU along with 5 or 6 or 8 virtual CPUs and the memory and the storage, and boom, bang, VM, pow, give it to you. The apps are on there. It's all secured. It's tied in. That's done. All those Legos you saw before are taken care of for you. And so in that, we deliver that to the folks that are out there. We even have, like Petra said earlier, if an entire region or part of a cloud goes down, there's resiliency across these clouds. Why? Because Workspot creates an abstraction layer in between you and those clouds. So you don't have to worry about which cloud is underlying and where that workstation is actually running. We make sure it's running and fast and in proximity to the user. And if you choose, there can be DR and business continuity built in even across cloud. So that's something really you could never do before. Okay, so this is the underlying architecture, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just to let you know, kind of how it's built underneath. If you want to learn more about this, we can, have follow-up sessions and go into some of the details. The beautiful part about this is that you're not building all the Legos yourself, but you do have control over the things you do need, okay? This is the customer data center down in the lower right-hand corner. That's where you are, and you've got Active Directory and a few bits and pieces. If you go up above that, you've got the customer subscription, project managed by customer, right? So that's where you go into maybe Azure, grab a subscription, and you put things in there. You might have Active Directory up there. You might have Panzera and some app servers up there. Realize you have an Azure Administrative UI, and Azure bills you for that consumption, okay? Now, over to the left of that, the shaded blue area, that's an additional subscription that we add on your behalf and connect it in, VNet peer, into your other environment. And all of that is where we drop in any and every virtual machine, CPU, GPU that you need for a cloud workstation. The whole thing. The building blocks that you saw before are delivered as a service in that space. And you don't see an Azure admin UI. And you don't get an Azure bill, right? It's a Workspot browser-based administrative management space to manage and fire off these workstations in the right region of the world. And it's an Azure bill that's flat, fixed, and predictable. Very different than the right-hand side. Now, on the right-hand side, you might have Panzera, and you might even have ASTI helping you manage new services in there and do various things. But on the left-hand side, that's a real turnkey service of workstations everywhere in the world working as they should. And you have an issue, contact Workspot directly, right? It's a full-on service, support, and everything. So it's quite good. Customers love it. So let's go talk about customers. One of which is Andy Knopf, CIO at Mead & Hunt, longtime customer of ours, thought leader. He figured all this stuff out 3 or 4 years ago. He's been Panzera forever, and he adds Workspot into his regions, and now he's golden, just like Petra said a while ago. It's like it's a game changer. These two technologies are flat out game changers for IT organizations. Their data is managed, their workstations are services in the clouds nearest their folks, and now they have agility to do amazing things. This slide actually is even updated since this. I think he's like 97 on the ENR list now and growing all the time. It's crazy. So you can see Mead & Hunt, the company, focusing on like airport design, roads, hospital, everything like that, they've done acquisitions and they've grown over time. And so they expanded to these footprints out here. And to cover that now, and by the way, they started with one Azure region with Workspot and Panzera, and they grew to a second and then a third, and now it doesn't matter. Wherever they have a project in the country, and if a project starts up, boom, they just fire up a bunch of workstations in that area and have Panzera set up as well. And if that project ends and they have something start in the West, boom, those resources go over there. It's the most dynamic, agile space they could have. By the way, I'm, telling this story here, and I'll show more customers. But if you have any questions on this, make sure you go into the Q&A box down below, and make sure you get those questions asked down there. We'll see them come along the way. Okay. So it's super clean. They're using all of these applications that you can see here and more, running on Windows 10, sitting on a virtual machine that is GPU accelerated, and then tied in a tightly coupled way in that last architecture I just showed you to Panzera to get the data. And so the user, again, is 20 to 30 milliseconds away. They're sitting at home and then kind of looking like this, right? So they're sitting there on any device. Could be a really inexpensive laptop or even desktop connected to multiple monitors. And when you run the Workspot client, you're going to actually connect, and that whole virtual space that runs in the cloud is just going to display right in front of you. Now, in fact, it's displaying here across 3 monitors. And in this case, this engineer or CAD manager has Revit on one screen and AutoCAD on the next, and even has email and collaboration tools on the other one. So they're just cranking away. And guess what happens if their physical device at home dies? Nothing happens, right? All of this is running in the cloud, and it's all secured up there. They just grab a new laptop or a Mac or an iPad, and they connect in, and they keep working. They pick up where they left off. It's a beautiful thing. And there's a number of different configurations you could go with here. You could go small, medium, large, and extra large as far as capability, all right? So let's go take a look at what that looks like now. I'll go ahead and just run a video here, and you guys will see. I captured this just yesterday, so it's a live demo I did. The reason I captured it is because of the responsiveness that you'll see. The only way you can see that is to watch the video. If you tried to watch my screen sharing, it just wouldn't be. It'd have all kinds of delays just through the webinar platform. So here you go. I opened up the client, the Workspot client, and I connected into this remote GPU accelerated workstation in the cloud. And here I'm running Revit. Now, a lot of our customers do this and all sorts of other applications, and they have great models. As I do webinars and have them host and do their live demos, they show their models. This is a sample model inside Revit. You guys probably all know it, right? And it's just this multi-level sort of home, and you can rotate around this model, and it's massively responsive. Now, I'm up inside Windows 10 running this in the cloud across multiple monitors, and so I can run things like PowerPoint and my email, and I could run Teams in here. Here I'm running a financial app, integrating with it and interacting with it, and then even Google Earth. Now, some of these apps are just crushing the GPU, and then other apps are just using the CPU. And then all of these things are hitting the internet. So when this thing is running in the internet, it is incredibly fast. You got gigabit performance when you're running your virtual GPU accelerated workstation in the cloud. And so you get great internet speeds, and you get great data speeds as well. You open up files from Panzera, close them down, and it is faster than anything you could ever get. So the productivity here is kind of crazy. So I'm running all these things at the same time. If you hover over this, you can see I've got great throughput and at like 27 millisecond latency. And when I'm done, I disconnect, and then it's over. That's it. I'm back to my machine that is at home there. All right. Now, another customer of ours is Barge Design. These folks you can see are focused on the East Coast. Dave Ferguson, IT Barge guy, came in before, during, and after, has a great story. He also, has Panzera in place and Workspot there as well. And so he brings these in, and you can see lightweight laptops with dual screens. Workspot is for all the designers. Certainly when the lockdown happened, these guys were all thought leaders, so they sent all this stuff home, and it worked out quite well. He's got a configuration that's primarily focused on the East Coast. You can see some of his applications like Bentley and the Adobe apps that are in there, and Esri and so forth. So pick any app you want, give it to the users that need it. He not only has employees, he's got contractors and interns, and this gives him the flexibility of handing them and taking away these workspaces. And, Josh came forward and did a nice, beautiful live demo for one of our webinars. And he talks about the implementation and how they rolled it out to their users. And at first, the users were going, no way. And then when they saw it and they used it, they said, I can't live without this. So these guys are using it. So is Hansen. So you got Bob Stinham, IT manager at Hansen. He's got it centralized in the central part of the country, and he's got folks coming in from all over and accessing it. It's also syncing with his main corporate office, as the other things do, certainly Panzera syncing. And they may have physical workstations with a few folks in the office, and they got virtual workstations for folks that are all over the place. This is Sean that did a great demo. This is just a nice, cool example of what a home environment looks like. You could have multiple 1, 2, 3 monitors, or maybe even one of these super wide stretched monitors. All those sorts of resolutions are supported. Again, it looks like it's there running at home, but it's not. It's in the cloud. And, to be wired and connected on a wired interface is cool because it gets your latency down, but even wireless in most cases is just fine. if you're in a part of the house where you can't even get a wire going. So that's cool. We got another customer called Wood Rogers. Mike just loves this. His quote here talks about how they put their CAD custom tools on there. In fact, even GIS, some of the really powerful ones out there. And it gives these guys the ability to perform in ways they couldn't before. So agility, and they can send folks home and they're productive. Their families are happy because they're working together in a time sliced way. You might have to be gone between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. at the soccer game, but you could work between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. if you need to, and make up some hours that you need, because you have that flexibility when you have it at the cloud. Wood Rogers had a lot of offices and a lot of employees that really benefited from this. And, even over texting and social media and various things, their employees and their families were really happy about this, especially during the lockdown. And the last thing that I'll show you is essentially, going global with this. So we do have another customer called Chart Industries that has tons of folks around the world doing things like this. They even have a lot of designers and engineers and so forth in India, and they're connecting in there into the Netherlands where their GPU accelerated workstations are running, and then those have direct access over the Azure fiber to get back into databases that are in the US. All right, so you can do this in real creative ways. You can give workstations in proximity, or you can pop a workstation in between the latency that would go around the world to minimize the user experience latency and minimize the database access latency. And this isn't files that are on Panzera. You wouldn't need that in this case. These guys were literally accessing database files that weren't replicatable and so forth, and they needed to find a creative way to do that. So we have many customers that are just functioning and cranking around the world these days and working and taking advantage of the proximity and the agility that's provided to you by putting your desktop or your workstation in the cloud and then consuming it as a service, as we said before, just to make it that much easier. So when you combine those two together, forget about it. Petra and I have so many happy customers, and we do webinars and all the time with them. Today we wanted to grab your time and share a number of those with you guys, so you'd understand, the benefits they're receiving. And many of those folks were also not in the cloud, just a few years ago as well. So this is new to a lot of folks. So we really hope you guys had a great day today. Thanks for the comments that you made earlier. And if you have any additional questions, you certainly know how to get a hold of us. There's our email addresses right there. Just like to thank everyone for joining us. Petra, thanks for sharing all the wonderful details. I just also wanted to let you guys know that a recording of this will be made available. And the folks at ASTI will send you a note. So look for that. And Misty will send you a wonderful thank you email with the link to the video. And we hope that's very helpful to you guys. Share that with your peers, those that also would like to know this information. And feel free to reach out to Petra and I. And Misty, hey, thank you so much for setting this up. We couldn't have a better time, and we really hope this was beneficial to your audience.
Absolutely. I think it had just such great content. So I just want to thank you guys for putting all of this together. We've got such amazing, engagement, and I can't wait to do future webinars. And to everyone who's joined us today, we do appreciate your time and really trust that this was impactful for yourself and your business. And we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.